Hi, this is Edward Troxel. In this tutorial we're going to continue where we left off on the last one, where we had listed all of the effects that are available for the selected event. So in this one we're going to select which effect that we want to adjust, and then we're going to pull out all the parameters we can adjust for that effect. And then from there we need to pull all the keyframes that are available to us. In fact, we also have to check to see if there's enough keyframes so that we can have actually two that we can go between. So let's take a look at how this is done. So now we figured out what's going to happen when we click this. What it's going to do is put a list of effects into this box. So what happens when we change this box? So let's double click that, and you'll see it comes down to the CMB effect list underscore selected index change. So when we change the item, then this routine will fire off because the index has changed. The item that has been selected is now a different item. So the first thing we need to do is clear the parameter items, and once again we're going to clear the text, clear the keyframes, once again we're going to clear the text. This is just done to clean things up a little bit. And then we're going to select our selected effect is null. So if our selected index is 0, we're going to return it equals 0. We know there's not an effect to check for. So now I'm going to get the video event once again from the selected event, and then in the parameters I'm going to add an item that says to select the desired parameter, and then I'm going to change the selected index to 0 so that that is the item that shows up in that box, so we know that that is our next step to do. Then I need to put the rest of the parameters in there. So for each effect, my effect in video event.effects, I want to look at the effect.description. If it equals the description that was in the effect list, then I know that I found the right effect. And then I need to convert that to an OFX effect, which I'm going to call OFX, which is my effect.OFX effect. So our selected effect is OFX. Now for each of the OFX parameters, which I'm just calling parm, in OFX.parameters, I want to check for two specific types because these are the only two types I'm going to work with, at least for now. So if the parameter type is an OFX parameter type dot double, or the parm.parameter type is a OFX parameter type dot double 2D, then I'm going to add that parameter to the list. And I just use the parameter.label, which is what you will see on the screen in Vegas as the name for that parameter. Okay, so now we've done the find selected event. We've listed all the effects available. We've picked an effect, and that has listed all the parameters that we have here. And so now we have to select the actual parameter we want to adjust. So we come down here and we have our CMB parameter underscore selected index changed. The first thing I'm going to do here is take my keyframes list and clear it, and then I'm going to make sure there's nothing displayed there. Now if the effect list dot selected index equals 0 or the selected effects equals null, I'm going to get out of here because obviously I haven't selected anything at this time. But for each OFX parameter parm in the selected effect dot parameters, I want to find the parameter that we selected. So if the parameter dot label equals the text of the selected one, then the first thing I want to do is select the desired timecode range that we want to adjust. What I'm going to do is list a timecode range, and to do that I am going to get the count from the check keyframe count routine. So that's a new routine that we've written. I'll go down and look at that in just a second. But if the get count is greater than 1, if I have more than one keyframe, Then I want to list all of the keyframe ranges. This time I'm just counting. For I have an integer that starts with 1, and as long as it's less than get count, I'm going to add 1. Then I'm going to add the keyframe choice, which is another routine that I've written using this parameter. This is the ith entry. If the get count was not greater than 1, then I'm going to add an item here that says there were not enough keyframes, and then display that. So let's look at these two routines, the check keyframe count and the add keyframe choice. So to get to this routine, I can just right click and choose go to definition. So this is the routine for check keyframe count. So the first thing I'm going to do is get count equal to 0. Then I'm going to check my parameter type. Is it a double? If it is, then I'm going to get my double parameter from the parm that was passed to it, which I just called P1, and then count equals P1.keyframes.count. If it wasn't a double parameter, then I check to see if it's a double 2D parameter. If it was, then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get the double 2D parameter, which I'm going to set into P2, and then I'm going to set count equal to P2.keyframes.count. And then I'm going to return that count. This needed to be done because I don't know if I'm going to have an OFX double parameter or if I'm going to have an OX double 2D parameter. So that simplified the routine up here. I could just call one single routine to get the count, and then that routine can figure out what type it is and do what needs to be done. The other routine was add keyframe choice, which is right here. And we are passing it the parameter and what I called the last keyframe. So I'm getting an OFX keyframe, which I called left, and I'm getting an OFX keyframe, which I called right. So once again, we've got to do it one of two ways. If it is a double, then once again I'm getting P1 is the OFX double parameter, and the left equals P1.keyframes, the last keyframe minus 1. The right one is P1.keyframes, last keyframe. So in this case, if there were 3 keyframes on there, the first time I am going in with a 1, and it is checking for 0 and 1 as the 2 keyframes. The next time I'm passing it a 2, and it's checking for 1 and 2 as the 2 keyframes, and then it's going to stop because our routine up here said as long as it is less than get count. So when it hit 3, it would not be less than get count because there were 3 keyframes. Then we're going to do the same thing. If it was a double 2D, then I'm going to get P2 is the double 2D parameter, and the left is going to be the P2 keyframe, last keyframe minus 1, and then the right is going to be P2.keyframes and the last keyframe. So now that I have my left and right keyframes, I am going to get a range, which is a string, and I'm going to get it from the left dot time, and then I'm going to add a dash, and then I'm going to show the right dot time. So I'm going to show the left keyframe's time and the right keyframe's time, and then I'm going to add that to my list of keyframes in the drop-down box. Then I want to check to see, is my cursor between 2 of these keyframes? So if the left time plus my selected event dot start is less than my cursor position, and the right time plus the selected event dot start is greater than the transport position, then I want to go ahead and select that keyframe list using this line here, the selected index, set it to that entry. That will simplify it by letting us put the cursor between 2 keyframes on the timeline. So if we look here in Vegas, I have an event with 3 keyframes. The original keyframe, one that I've added here, and one that I've added here. If I put my cursor between these 2 keyframes, then I want that range to automatically be selected. So now we've figured out the code behind the Find button so that we could find which event is selected on the timeline. Then from there, it's listed the effects that are available on that event, and that list in the effect combo box where we can select which effect to apply the keyframes to. Then you select which effect and it will list all the parameters that are available on that effect. Next we select the parameter and it will list all the keyframes that are available for that parameter. Then we have to select the keyframe, and that is where we will start in the next tutorial by selecting the keyframe, figuring out what to do with that, and then selecting the easing type, figuring out how to display the image, and then finally we will figure out how the Add the Keyframes button works. So tune in to the next tutorial as we continue. Please sign up at www.JETDV.com and subscribe on YouTube to get further notifications on when new videos are presented.